But if there is a reality, truth, whatever's true, is just simply that which corresponds to reality. A simple example, we call the object we see at night in the sky the moon. The moon exists. It's real. And so to say there is a moon is truth because it corresponds to something that is real. Now, I'm convinced, especially in my sort of new understanding of John's approach, I'm convinced that the reason these things are true is because they are inherent to the character of God. And as we discuss these principles, you'll see that. In the Old Testament, once you see something, you see it everywhere. In the Old Testament, God said, "Come, let us reason together." And he finishes that, "Though your sins be as scarlet, they shall be as white as snow." But the word that stands out to me is the word reason. Let us reason together. Let's be reasonable. That is amazing to me that God would say that. He's wanting us to think about our existence. He's wanting us to think about our purpose. And most of everybody does that at some point, to some degree. I remember as a small child wondering, why am I here? How did I get here? Where am I going? In the New Testament, there's an even more powerful verse, I think, and I'm not going to read it, but I'll quote it to you. It's in 1 Thessalonians. It says, "Test all things." Well, what are we testing them by? If somebody makes a truth claim, if somebody claims something to be true, even Christianity, we are encouraged to test that truth claim, to test what they're saying. Prove all things in the King James. I like that. Proving means testing. Test all things, and it says hold fast, hang on to that which is true. Spit out the bones, keep what is true. I really like that, and everybody uses logic, not just philosophers. As I said, most everybody thinks about their existence at some point or another. When I was a kid, I used to think maybe that I was a part of somebody's dream, and when they woke up, I'd cease to exist. So far, they haven't awakened, apparently, because I'm still here. But existence and reason are the two most basic assumptions that we have. In other words, I exist, and I think logically about my existence. Now, some people would say we don't exist. There are those who would say nothing is real, all is an illusion. If we deny our existence, by our very denial, we are affirming our existence. If we didn't exist, how could we deny our own existence? And we use reason to do it. Now, I think that's self-evident. I hope that doesn't seem like I'm trying to pick a fight or something. It just seems so self-evident to me that if I think about my reality, two things are evident, self-evident, that I do exist and that I am reasoning, I'm thinking logically about my own existence. Thinking about thinking. That may sound kind of weird. Thinking about thinking, how do I think? How does my mind work? Is the science of logic. It comes under the heading of philosophy. Now here's the first question, okay, and we'll establish right after the break the first principle of logic. And as I say, can't say it all in one program, so I'll end up doing this as a series. Here it is. Can opposite truth claims both be true? And that's a very important question. Can two things that are opposite both be true in the same world at the same time? The basic, what Aristotle would call the first principle of logic, is that they can't. It's called the law of non-contradiction. They can't be true and false at the same time. I'm either here or I'm not here, but I can't both be here and not here. Now, so-called Eastern logic would deny that, perhaps. But that is what Aristotle called, and of course, you got to keep in mind, he was before Christ, was not a Christian, but that's what he called the law of non-contradiction. So after the break, we'll come back and pick up at that point. So I hope you stay with us on Church for Skeptics.
We hope you're finding Church for Skeptics informative and helpful. We encourage you to email us topics concerning faith that you'd like to hear discussed on the program.
You have tried to mend your broken heart. You have cried till your tears have dried. The dryness of your soul is the
Hey, welcome back to Church for Skeptics. We're laying a big foundation here as we start into our third season, and I hope you'll stay with us. This is going to sound a lot different. It has, if you've been listening. We're talking about logic, the rules of logic as established by Aristotle. Here's what the plan is. We're going to establish these principles as self-evident, the first principles of logic, the law of non-contradiction, which we've been talking about, the law of identity, which simply means that something is what we say it is, however we want to describe it or whatever name we assign to it. It just simply means we're talking about that thing, that there's a real identity to it. That's the law of identity. And then there's also what's called the law of excluded middle, that it can't be what it is and not what it is at the same time. So we're talking about, can opposite truth claims be true and non-true or at the same time, or can opposite claims both be true? A pluralist, somebody who believes that there are many answers to the most important questions of life, a pluralist would say, oh yes, there can be a lot of different answers to the same question. And that is sort of the pantheistic worldview. The Christian worldview, of course, is the opposite of that. Now, let's put some flesh on that thought, and maybe you can get a hold of it a little bit better. Can the pantheistic worldview and the Christian worldview both be true? I'll give you an even more concrete example. Christians would say evil is real, that it really exists, and most people would agree with that probably. The Hindu would say, the pantheist would say, evil is an illusion. Now, without claiming one of those to be true, obviously I would believe the Christian view, but without getting into that part of it, the question at hand is, can both of those statements be true? Can evil be real and be an illusion at the same time? The basic law of non-contradiction, Aristotle's first principle, would say they can't both be true. They could both be false, or one of them could be true, but since they are opposite truth claims, they can't both be true at the same time. Now that alludes to something else, that there is a truth, there is a reality that is beyond both of those claims. There's truth that exists no matter what we think, in other words. Another example of this, Christians are more and more, unfortunately, and sometimes it's true. I want to concede that sometimes Christians certainly are not very good representatives of Christ. When somebody believes in absolute truth, and Christianity is one of those things, today in the postmodern culture they are labeled as intolerant. Because I believe that Christianity is right and Hinduism, let's say, is wrong, just incorrect, I would be labeled as intolerant. Now, by intolerant, they mean that we say one thing is right and that they both can't be right. We're just adhering and affirming Aristotle's first principle of logic. They can't both be true. Now, in the postmodern way of thinking, that's intolerant. So, but I want to show you how self-defeating that view is. In their view, tolerance and intolerance are opposite views. In other words, they say, you can't say anything is right or wrong completely. I say, yes, I can. I can believe that something is right exclusively to something else. Now, in their own denial, they are proving the law of non-contradiction. They are saying that tolerance and intolerance are different. They can't be the same. They can't both be true. I'm either tolerant or intolerant by their definition. So if they're not the same, if tolerance and intolerance can't both be true, then the first principle of logic, the law of non-contradiction, is established. I hope you see what I'm saying there, that you can't even make sense out of anything, is what I'm saying, unless you can distinguish between truth claims, whether in physics or metaphysics, which is the study of things not physical, of course, like the question of is there a God. So the law of non-contradiction, is unavoidable. I don't think we can communicate that. It must be used even to deny it. If somebody says, look, that logic is just somebody made up, it's not necessarily true, they're saying that as a true statement. And they're saying that as